Vladimir Putin is scared. Russia's president would never admit it. He would never be out in public showing his fear to the world. But then that's the point. Putin has suddenly disappeared from the Kremlin altogether. And the reason why is that something has scared him so badly that he's gone underground to avoid it. Even the Kremlin isn't safe anymore for paranoid Putin, as Russia's desperate leader tries to defend the only thing that really matters to him in this world, his own life. It's been a long time since Putin was last seen in the Kremlin. According to RBC Ukraine, March 9th was the last time that any sign of Russia's president was seen at a public Kremlin event. It's not like Putin hasn't taken breaks from the Kremlin before, but this is one of the longest absences from what is supposed to be the Russian seat of power that we've ever seen. And it's happening right as Russia launches what is supposed to be a spring and summer offensive that will finally see it achieve everything that Putin wants in the embattled Donbas region. Disregarding the likely failure of that offensive, the fact that Putin seems to have vanished into thin air during such a critical juncture tells us that something is going very wrong in the paranoid mind of the Russian president. And the evidence is mounting that he's doing everything that he can to stay as far away from the public eye as possible. Let's talk about the last public appearance for a moment. On March 9th, Putin took part in a meeting regarding the global oil and gas markets, both of which have been upended by Operation Epic Fury in Iran. Since then, it seems that Putin has been taking part in meetings remotely, such as on March 18th, when he held an online meeting with the Russian government, supposedly conducted from his Novo residence in Moscow. But even the legitimacy of that meeting is up for debate, as there are rumblings that his appearance was a pre-filmed or canned video, and there are certain signs that Russia's leader has been faking his location, even in these online meetings. Office trickery is far from a new thing for Putin. As Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty, or RFL, reports, November brought with it news that Putin has been actively obscuring his location for months. How? By setting up nearly 3 identical offices in different locations, ensuring that nobody ever quite has a bead on where he is. Or at least, that's what Putin was doing. In the 160 or so days since the news broke, the Kremlin has released no videos or photos of Putin being in any of those offices, which is another sign that Russia's leader is afraid. His sneaky little plan to stay under the radar has been rumble. And the visual markers that gave the game away the first time round have been either changed or Putin has found himself some new underground bunkers and offices from which to operate. So Putin was already in hiding even before his latest Kremlin absence. But here's where things get even stranger. On March 4th, just before Putin took what has now become, shall we say, an extended leave of absence from his Kremlin duties, RFL published an interesting report that seems to prove that many of Putin's appearances are being filmed well in advance of when they supposedly happen. And what gave the game away this time? Plants. The outlet says that March 2nd and 3rd saw Putin's lackeys post videos showing him supposedly meeting with officials that included the head of Russia's federal treasury and the governor of the far eastern Amur region of Russia. Those meetings were reported on Russian state TV along with footage, and that's where things took a turn. According to RFL, a Chinese evergreen plant seen in the background of this March footage shows that whatever Putin had filmed in his office for the meetings actually took place somewhere between February 9th and February 17th, not in early March. Those plants had started to rot away by early February. RFL reports officials had clearly replaced those older plants with new ones, as shown by footage that was published by the Kremlin during February. However, the supposed March meetings we just mentioned clearly show that the old plants are still in place. Somebody in Putin's circle made a mistake, and in doing so, they revealed that Russia's leader is filming footage of himself taking part in meetings literally weeks before Russia claims those meetings have happened. So fake offices, abandoned offices, all sorts of timing mishaps with meetings, and now a complete disappearance from the Kremlin. These are not the actions of a leader who is confident in himself, a leader who has so long portrayed himself as the indomitable strongman of Russian politics, which has been the root of his power for over 2 decades. Gone seem to be the days when Putin paraded about in carefully orchestrated photographs, showing him doing such manly things as working out, entering submersibles, and paragliding. In their place is a version of Putin that is trying very hard to disappear, to hide himself away from everything. The strong man has become the weak and scared little man of Russia, and he can't hide away from that fact. No matter how many tricks he tries to pull, Russia's leader has gone underground. And the reason why is that a few things have changed in Russia over the past couple of months. Or should we say something pretty major has happened in Iran that has gotten Putin so spooked that he had to go into hiding? When the US launched Operation Epic Fury, even Putin had no idea just how devastating the operation would be for Iran. As heaps of military infrastructure went up in flames during the first day of an operation that has now lasted for almost a month. One loss in particular sent shivers down Putin's spine. And it happened on the very first day. Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei was killed. This was a man who, like Putin is doing right, now tried everything to keep out of the sights of his enemies. But he was still eliminated in a clinical operation that The Guardian reports took all of 60 seconds for the US and Israel to execute. The CIA and other US intelligence services spent 6 months gathering intelligence on Cam before the fateful February 28th strike. And then, just like that, bunker-busting bombs were dropped, instantly penetrating KA's hideout, killing him and around 40 other Iranian military commanders. KA never saw the attack coming, and he never believed the US would be able to hit him. Commune was wrong, and Putin has been paying attention. It's no coincidence that Putin's Kremlin disappearance, along with all his office hijinks, just so happened to coincide with the days immediately after KA's elimination. Putin watched as the US, which has historically been Russia's enemy, pulled off an operation so deadly and efficient that he couldn't help but think that it could do the same to him, at any time. Parading around in public in the Kremlin would only make it easier for his enemies to find him. Putin appears to have concluded, and once news started breaking about how the US and Israel managed to get their man in Iran, Putin's paranoia only grew deeper. According to the Financial Times, it's now believed that the US managed to track Khamenei's location by hacking into traffic cameras in the Iranian capital of Tehran as part of a long-term surveillance operation. Can you imagine what must have gone through Putin's mind in this moment? The very kinds of devices that he is supposed to be able to rely upon to provide security may have just been watching him all along, just as they were watching Khamenei. Just like that, a distrust of cameras must have formed that sheds a whole new light on the videos we talked about earlier. Putin doesn't want to be caught live streaming his location while holding meetings with Kremlin officials. That's why he's using recordings, and he certainly doesn't want to be seen in person because he never knows who could be watching and reporting back to his enemies, be they in the Kremlin itself or further afield. Putin's paranoia has finally gotten the best of him. And again, there were signs that this was going to happen as soon as the US proved that it could hit somebody like Kin. But before we get into that, this is a quick reminder that you are watching the Military Show. We bring you the full picture, not just the headlines. If you like what you're seeing, hit subscribe so you never miss a video. Cameras are far from the only type of technology that Putin hides away from. Hints of this technophobia have been apparent since the very beginning of the Ukraine invasion. Toward the end of 2022, the South China Morning Post carried an interesting report claiming that Putin absolutely refuses to use the internet. Instead, demanding that all information he needs be provided to him via physical documents. Russia's president won't even use a smartphone, the same report claims, and it says that both Russian and US officials have backed these claims. Business Insider has also backed them by way of a former Russian intelligence officer who has since defected. In April 2023, Gleb Karakulov explained all, stating, "In all my years of service, I haven't seen him once with a mobile phone." He added, he doesn't use the internet or a mobile phone. He only receives information from his closest circle, which means that he lives in an information vacuum. Suddenly, we start to see why Russia is failing so hard in Ukraine. The man who is supposed to be leading the information isn't using the tools that he needs to get his hands on the sort of time-sensitive information that he needs to react to the constant changes on the front. Putin's demands for physical documents mean that information he should be getting instantly isn't arriving for hours or perhaps even days. Putin's paranoia is crippling the pathies that he sent to Ukraine, but more importantly, it's crippling his ability to serve as the strongman president he has, for so long, claimed to be. This is also a man who is terrified of germs. He's afraid of being poisoned. Putin would prefer never to fly in an airplane because he's afraid that it'll be blown up while he's inside. You might recognize these kinds of tactics as the very ones that Putin himself has deployed against his enemies. Perhaps Putin believes in karma. What goes around might well come around for Russia's leader, and he wants to be nowhere to be found when the sort of tactics he and Russia uses constantly are brought to bear against him. What we're starting to see here is the story of a man who has become so encompassed by his own fear that he has paralyzed himself. No internet, no cameras, no Kremlin. And in the wake of Haman's elimination, Putin is also waking up to the fact that no matter how hard he tries, he won't be able to escape what he increasingly believes could be coming for him. It's not just what happened to Ham that has caused Putin to become a no-show in the Kremlin. It's the fact the elimination of Iran's leader is the latest sign that the U.S. is no longer playing by the same rulebook that it has been for decades. After all, it was only a couple of months before the launch of Operation Epic Fury that the U.S. sent elite operatives into Venezuela to capture former president, and many would say dictator Nicolas Maduro. It also isn't lost on Putin that both Maduro and Hmin were allies to Moscow, and yet the U.S. has managed to take them both down in the combined space of less than 2 days. Again, it's breathtaking efficiency, but it also isn't how any of this is supposed to be happening. Putin is the man who has always been accustomed to not playing by the rules. When he needed something done in another country, he could make it happen, and he could do it while giving himself enough plausible deniability to claim that he had no involvement. But now he's having to watch as the U.S. very openly takes out leaders who share more than a few similarities with him. These are despots and dictators who are falling to the U.S., and both of those labels can be applied to Putin just as readily as they have been to Haman and Maduro. Could he be next? That's the big question that must be swirling around in Putin's mind right now. And it may be the biggest reason why he's gone underground. He wants to be out of sight because he's starting to feel like he's running the kind of brittle regime that could easily become a target for a country that has proven twice in 2026 alone that it has a knack for taking out despots. Putin's paranoia isn't trapped in his own mind. It's not just his actions in his fake offices and his inaction in the Kremlin that tell us everything that we need to know about where Putin is right now. The problem for Putin is this. He's so desperate to be seen as the strong man in his weakest moments that he is hurting the Russian people. We told you earlier that Putin is so deathly afraid of being tracked via the internet that he simply refuses to use it or any smartphones that could connect to it. But at least up until this point, he recognized that the net was a useful tool for Russia's people and its military to use. That all seems to have gone out the window. Like so many of Putin's past enemies now, as Russia's president is overseeing a crackdown on the net all over Russia. Complete internet blackouts are becoming commonplace all over the country. Digital censorship is nothing new for Russia, but sweeping internet and mobile service outages that go as deep as Moscow are. These outages build on the selective ones that Russia has been employing for months, which it always says are a tactic to counter Ukraine's drones, but really seem like a way for it to shut down any discourse that follows after those drones hit their targets. CNN says that speculation about these shutdowns is rife with some claiming that they're being done to get ahead of any efforts that the Russian public might make to protest an anticipated mobilization effort by Putin. Again, Russia's leader is trying to protect himself from something that he thinks can hurt him. If he doesn't see protests, then there must be no appetite for them. Of course, he ignores the fact that his internet mobile crackdowns are now so severe that some in Russia have resorted to using walkie-talkies to communicate with one another. Others point to the issues we've already discussed related to Putin's fear after he has seen U.S.-led regime changes in Iran and Venezuela. If nobody can access the internet in Russia, then nobody can use it to take photos, send information, or do anything that might have the slightest possibility of revealing where Putin is. Putin is trying to tighten his grip on Russia even as his fingers are breaking. And the internet shutdowns are accompanied by a campaign against the social media app Telegram, which is a main source of information for many inside Russia. The Kremlin has been working with internal tech companies for years to create Putin-approved replacements for Telegram and WhatsApp. Messenger Max is the app that those tech heads have come up with, And once again, this just so happens to be an app that will likely give the Kremlin near limitless access to what Russian people are saying. Putin wants his people to use the state-approved and unestablished alternative rather than using Telegram, which more than 60% of the population currently uses. Messenger Max is better. At least Messenger Max means that Putin can have people constantly observing what's happening on an internet that he is too afraid to use. It's yet another sign of fear for a man who hasn't been seen in the Kremlin for about 2 weeks. And these shutdowns also happen to coincide with whispers of a coup that have been rumbling in the Kremlin. Though these whispers have since been declared wishful thinking in outlets such as the Kiev Independent, the story itself is enough to strike even more fear into Putin. The idea is that after Putin arrested yet another ally of his former defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, that former Putin lackey has been arranging a coup that would strip Putin of his power. It doesn't help that yet another of Moscow's internet shutdowns happened right as Putin's operatives were arresting former Deputy Defense Minister Ruslan Salakov, who is the Shoigu ally in question. Everything we've talked about in these videos amounts to signs that Putin's paranoia has finally gotten the best of him, and it shouldn't come as any surprise. Beyond what the US has been doing in other countries, Putin is overseeing a regime that is under increasing pressure. As we speak, Ukraine has reclaimed more territory during a February counteroffensive against Russian forces than it's liberated since 2023, around 400 kilometers or 154 square miles in southern Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions are back in Ukraine's hands, which is a blow to Putin's narrative that Ukraine is a country that is on the edge of defeat. Kremlin propagandists are even starting to turn against Putin. One of those propagandists is Ilya Romeslo, who is a lawyer who has long had a reputation as a hardline supporter of the Ukraine invasion. Putin has rewarded this support with slots on state television, and Romeslo has repaid him with claims that 2026 is the year that Putin will be overthrown. That's according to the International Business Times, which reported on March 18th that Putin's supposed ally has claimed that his president is becoming weaker and weaker year after year. And there are clear signs that a collapse in the system that has propped Putin up for over a quarter of a century is coming. Maybe that's what we're really seeing with Putin's Kremlin disappearance, along with everything else that we've covered in this video. Putin is no longer the supremely self-confident leader that he has always portrayed himself to be. After 4 years of a failed special military operation in Ukraine, and especially after seeing what the US has done in Iran and Venezuela, Putin has devolved. He's not all-powerful anymore. He's a scared little dictator, bouncing between hidden offices and refusing to show his face because he's starting to think that his time is near. And in his paranoid mind, he can't even figure out who his enemies are. Is it the US, the Russian people, his supposed Kremlin allies? All of them? None of them. Putin just doesn't know, and his only solution is to go so far underground that nobody can get to him. And in doing that, he neuters himself as an effective leader. The disastrous start to Russia's spring offensive won't have done anything to allay Putin's fear for his own life. What was supposed to be the start of a dramatic Russian surge has only led to a record-breaking number of losses for Russia's forces. Heavy defeats and Ukrainian counterattacks aren't how a weakened Putin is going to showcase strength. And you can learn all about Russia's failure in our video. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the Military Show to see more analysis of how Russia's most powerful man is allowing paranoia to eat him up from the inside. And thank you as always for watching.